You know, you mentioned wrestling with those conflicting viewpoints you've been running into within Christianity.
Hmm.
It's like trying to bake a cake and finding out someone swapped the sugar for salt unsettling, right?
Yeah.
And you're spot on to want to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
It can be really hard to know what to trust when you're hearing different things from people who all claim to be following the same faith.
Absolutely.
And it goes beyond just honest disagreements about interpretations, which are normal, by the way.
Right.
Today, we're diving into something that might surprise you.
Okay.
It's a tactic some anti-theists use that could help make sense of these conflicting viewpoints you've been encountering.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just honest disagreements about interpretations, which are normal, by the way.
And
Today, we're diving into something that might surprise you. It's a tactic some anti-theists use that could help make sense of these conflicting viewpoints you've been encountering.
okay, color me intrigued. Anti-theists actively trying to cause confusion within Christianity. Lay it on me.
Right. It's a little like finding out someone's been messing with your recipe book on purpose.
Okay.
The source we're looking at, an excerpt from thickshades.com called Navigating the Crossfire. A Christian responds to anti-theist tactics, calls it sowing discord.
Sowing discord. It sounds like something out of a spy movie. Are we talking about anti-theists actively infiltrating churches or something?
It's subtler than that, but the analogy isn't that far off.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily trying to convert Christians to atheism directly. Instead, they might highlight or even exaggerate existing disagreements between different Christian groups. Those age-old debates about interpretations of Scripture or different denominations' practices.
So instead of directly debating Christian beliefs, they're kind of poking at existing disagreements, hoping to make them worse.
Exactly. Think of it like throwing fuel on a fire that's already smoldering. They know Christians already have different viewpoints, and they're trying to exploit that by making those differences seem more significant than they actually are.
And the goal of this is to, what, make Christians doubt their faith altogether? Or each other?
Both, potentially. The source suggests it's less about winning arguments and more about sowing distrust and undermining the Christian community as a whole. If Christians are too busy fighting amongst themselves, they're less likely to present a united front or effectively share their faith.
Divide and conquer. Classic strategy.
Yeah.
And it makes a certain kind of sense, sadly. There's that saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that this tactic doesn't rely on complex arguments or theological debates. It preys on a very human weakness, our tendency towards gossip and intrigue. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're wired to pay attention to anything that sounds like insider information,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not necessarily true.
Oh, 100%. We all know we shouldn't listen to gossip, but there's something about that don't tell anyone, but that
Yeah.
just sucks you right in. It's like that old saying, a rumor travels halfway around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on.
Right.
Except in this case, it's less about spreading outright lies and more about twisting the truth, right?
Exactly. It's about taking existing tensions and amplifying them,
Right.
often by framing disagreements in the most negative light possible.
Yeah.
It's like social media's someone shares a quote from a pastor they disagree with,
Yeah.
completely out of context, and suddenly everyone's jumping down each other's throats without even bothering to check the source or understand the full context.
And because it sounds believable, well, I did hear Pastor so-and-so say something like that once. People just accept it without really questioning it. It feels almost insidious, Like, how do you even begin to combat that kind of intentional misinformation?
Well, the source actually points to the Bible itself for guidance,
Okay.
which I always find interesting.
Okay, love a good dose of ancient wisdom. What does it say?
Proverbs 16.28. A perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. It's a good reminder that these tactics aren't new.
Yeah.
People have been trying to sow discord through gossip and manipulation for centuries.
And that right there is why the Bible's still relevant thousands of years later, folks. Human nature doesn't change much, does it? But I think there's a danger here, too. It's easy to hear this and think, okay, I need to be suspicious of anyone who disagrees with me.
Right.
But that just shuts down conversation entirely.
Absolutely. The source makes a really important distinction between healthy disagreements, those iron sharpens iron conversations that can actually strengthen our faith,
Right.
and intentionally divisive rhetoric designed to tear people apart.
So how do you tell the difference? How can you spot when someone is genuinely trying to have a productive conversation about faith, even if it's a tough one, versus someone who's just trying to stir up trouble?
The source emphasizes discernment. Don't just accept information,
Okay.
especially juicy gossip, at face value.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
What's the agenda of the person sharing this?
Right.
And could this be a case of someone intentionally trying to divide Christians?
Fact check before you share check. Seems like a good rule of thumb for, well, life in general these days. But it can't all be about being suspicious. Right. What about actively promoting truth and understanding?
That's the second part of the source's call to action. Don't let awareness of these tactics make you cynical or closed off to genuine dialogue. Remember, just because this strategy exists doesn't mean every disagreement stems from malicious intent.
Right. We don't want to become the very thing we're trying to combat. We have to assume the best of others, even when it's difficult.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's where open and honest conversation comes in. It's about engaging with people who think differently than we do.
Right.
Not to win an argument,
Right.
but to understand their perspective and share our own in a respectful and constructive way.
Which is so much easier said than done sometimes, am I right? So how do we actually do that well? How do we have those kinds of conversations, especially with people who we might suspect are using these divisive tactics without getting sucked into the drama?
Well, the source offers a few practical tips.
Okay.
First, be intentional about seeking out diverse perspectives.
Okay, so step outside your echo chamber. Talk to people who challenge your assumptions.
Exactly. If you only ever listen to people who agree with you,
Right.
it's easy to get trapped in a bubble and lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Exactly. And then when you are engaging with people who have different viewpoints,
Yeah.
another key tip from the source is to verify information carefully.
We're talking full-on internet detective mode.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Don't just believe everything you read online,
Right.
especially if it confirms your existing biases or seems designed to provoke outrage.
Right.
Take the time to check sources,
Yeah.
look for evidence, and be wary of anything that seems too good or too bad to be true.
So be discerning consumers of information. Got it. Now, this whole conversation about anti-theist tactics, it kind of makes you wonder why someone would even feel the need to resort to such roundabout methods, you know?
You're right, and the source does touch on that.
Yeah.
It suggests that this reliance on sneaky tactics might actually reveal a weakness in the anti-theist's position.
Interesting. You're saying their tactics betray a lack of confidence in their own arguments?
Precisely. Think about it. If you genuinely believed you had the truth,
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to engage in open and honest debate,
Right.
confident that your arguments would stand on their own merit?
That's a good point. It's like they know they can't win in a fair fight, so they resort to playing dirty.
That's the idea the source is putting forward. It connects back to intellectual honesty. If someone has to resort to manipulation and deception to discredit a belief system, maybe their own arguments aren't as strong as they claim them to be.
It's kind of a backhanded compliment, isn't it?
Right.
Like if they have to resort to trickery, maybe those ideas are more resilient than they thought. But where does that leave us? If some people are out there using these underhanded tactics, how do we, as everyday Christians, navigate conversations about faith in a way that's both wise and winsome?
The source ends on a hopeful note,
Okay.
reminding us that while deceit and manipulation might work in the short term,
Right.
truth has a way of bubbling to the surface.
It's like that saying, truth will out, right?
Yeah.
You can't hide it forever. It's reassuring in a way we don't have to get caught up in those same games.
Exactly. And, you know, sometimes those tactics can even backfire.
Right.
When people realize they've been manipulated or fed misinformation,
Yeah.
it can actually strengthen their faith and their resolve. It's
Yeah.
like they tested the foundations and found them solid.
There's a metaphor in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, instead of a house divided, it's more like those wind-tested trees
Right.
growing even stronger roots because they had to withstand the pressure.
I like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, that makes me think, what if instead of just being on the defensive,
Right.
we use these situations as opportunities for growth, both for ourselves and for others?
Turn the tables. How so?
Well, what if we saw these encounters, these attempts to sow discord
Right.
as a chance to model a different way of engaging in conversations about faith?
Okay.
Not with defensiveness or judgment,
Right.
but with grace, understanding,
Right.
and a genuine desire to find common ground.
So embodying the very values and principles those divisive tactics try to undermine?
Exactly. By responding to anger with love,
Yeah.
to hearsay with truth, to judgment with open-mindedness. We can create a more welcoming and intellectually honest space for everyone.
It's like rising above the noise and setting a better example.
Right.
Who knows, maybe even inspiring others to do the same?
Yeah.
Right.
Wouldn't that be something if our commitment to truth and integrity actually helps someone else break free from those patterns of manipulation and division?
Now there's a goal worth striving for. So for you listening, here's something to chew on. As you navigate those sometimes choppy waters of faith and conflicting viewpoints, how can you be a force for unity and understanding, even especially when it's tough?
Because at the end of the day, building bridges is always more effective than burning them down.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, stay curious, and keep seeking truth.